As the saying goes, a developed nation is not where poor can afford and travel by car, but where the richest travel by the public transportation. Public transportation, without any doubt, is the most efficient way to move the masses in a cost-effective and sustainable ways. Hi everyone, this is CK Shukarma, and you're watching Expert Insights by All Things Connected. Today with me in the conversation is Alok Jain, Managing Director, Transconsult, a consulting and advisory firm focusing on public transportation and mobility based out of Hong Kong. Alok is also a council member of Council for Decarbonizing Transport in Asia, and we'll talk about it in a while. Welcome, Alok. And while we know each other for a few years already, for the benefit of our viewers, could you please share a little bit about your journey and how you entered into public transportation mobility world, and what kind of transformation you have seen in your last almost 30 years of career?
Wow, that 30 years is a very long time these days. So I started my career as such in public transport field. So, and that was primarily in when I came to Hong Kong, and I joined the railway company in Hong Kong. And in those days, I mean, I was just a civil engineer designing railway systems. I was working on the design side on a new project. There were new railway lines coming here, but I was probably a bit restless in those aspects. So I moved very quickly from engineering to strategy, to then move to finance, and to move to operations, and then I moved to marketing. So I kind of just did the whole journey over a period of 13 years within the organization into different divisions and departments of that and Hong Kong railway system, which was, even in those days, was among one of the best in the world. And the idea here was to create a public transport system that is loved by people, that is used by people, and customers are satisfied with using those services. And Hong Kong is one of the unique places in that sense. It has the highest public transport usage in the world. So every day, more than 85% of the Hong Kong journeys are actually made on public transport. So after my railway stint, I went into consulting. I did consulting for a few years, was involved with a number of projects in India, Middle East, Singapore. And then I joined the bus company in Hong Kong, and I started managing the bus company. So we had 4,000 buses carrying about 3 million people a day. It's the largest bus company of Hong Kong, called KMB. And I was there for 3.5 years. And one of the biggest challenges we had when I joined was that the company was a loss-making company. Hong Kong has no subsidy for public transport. And the challenge was to make this company viable, financially sustainable. And that was when we started looking into what are the areas where performance, efficiency, technology can really enable us and drive that growth within the company. So to cut the long story short, in 2013, the company was losing $120 million, Hong Kong dollars a year. And by 2016, we made $750 million in profit. So it was a complete turnaround. And we didn't fire a single person. We didn't reduce any operations. We didn't reduce the service size. But it was all, you can imagine, the whole value was within the company, which was unlocked using data, using technology, using good practices. So it was a combination of all the things which allowed us to transform that. And that made me a firm believer that, because almost 99% of the public transport operation around the world is a loss-making operation. Okay? So, but this transformation gave me a confidence and a belief that we can, if we approach this problem correctly, we can actually change the world. We can make a lot of these public transport companies viable, which will be used by people. People will love to use them. And this is an opportunity to transform the cities, or the mobility in the cities that we see. And so that was the basis how we went into consulting space. And we are working on that. So I don't call myself just a pure consultant. I'm a part activist, part consultant. So we work very with a clear conscience, We are only working for public transport. We don't work for anything that creates problems in cities. We are trying to solve the problem for the future, not create a problem for the future. So that's the basic tenet that we have.
A very nice introduction. I like this consulting slash activist approach. And same thing which we also follow in all things connected, that you're not just advising somebody for this idea's sake of it, but let's live up and get the things done as well. So I think this is your experience of being yourself in the position of an operator as a CEO for the company, as well as day in, day out, dealing with the ground challenges. And like you said, there was impressive turnaround from a loss-making company to a profit-making company without any changes or reduction in the services, the quality of the services. In your discussions, while you advise global senior leaders, and I mean, you have been with a range of regions, developed places, developing countries, all of them. What are the primary challenges you see for them to adopt and accelerate the development of public transportation mobility infrastructure in their respective regions? Maybe you could, if there are any region-specific challenges, maybe you could give some example.
Right. Very, very interesting question, CK. So I think one fundamental, common or general principle that I see around the world is this mindset among the people, and that was your opening statement too. The mindset among people that public transport is for those people who cannot afford a car. And this fundamental mindset is the biggest challenge that we have. Automotive companies, people who sell you cars, they spend something to the tune of 10 billion US dollars per year in advertising alone. Okay. And all the advertisement that you see about automotive in the cities is very aspirational. There is never a traffic congestion they will show you. You always see beautiful, you never see the smoke coming out of their tailpipes. You never see the problems that they're creating. So but it builds that perception in people that this is safe, this is what one should have, this is liberty, this is freedom. But what we don't, and I always say that I compare myself, and I do own a car, and I can tell you when I'm sitting and driving, I can't do anything. I'm literally a prisoner at that time. I cannot check my phones, and I cannot do anything. But I'm very active on social media, and a number of people ask me that with your work, how do you get time to be on social media? And my answer is always very simple. It's because I take public transport. So my public transport time, when I'm sitting in a bus or a train, that time is my social media time, because I can't work at that time, but I do, I use my time in other ways that are, where I connect with friends, I reply to my messages, and I do a lot of those things. If you are driving a car, unfortunately, you lose that freedom. So it becomes, my 2 hours of commuting, which could be my unproductive time, is now very active engagement time. So that is a simple way how it's a general thing around the world. Specific problems. So yes, there are some people in different parts of the world where money is not a problem, and public transport in those places becomes so subsidized that it has become highly inefficient. So they have very shiny gadgets. They put all the technology. They have all the sensors. They have all the data. And I can tell you, I mean, this is a question that I've asked in different parts of the world, that what amount of data you use as compared to what you generate. And I can tell you that this number, even people who are responding to me, working in those organizations, they tell me it's in single digits. So if you're generating 100%, then you are using actually only 7, 8, 9% of this data. And you can imagine the gross wastage of that information and knowledge that we are doing at the moment. Okay. And what I intend to do, and this is a conversation I have, is where if you utilize this data or deploy these tools in a slightly more efficient manner, you can transform it. But there is no incentive to transform, because they are subsidy-driven models. And this is Europe, America. They assume the transport is going to suck in the money. Okay. So this mindset of changing and bringing the transformation, the pressure is not there. And that's why we have been a bit behind as a public transport industry on creating disruptions in the industry. We are still very traditional industry. We are tailing behind everyone. When everybody in the world has made the changes in their IT system, then we stand in the queue and say, now we have to do it. Okay, so we live with a legacy in there. But countries which are new, which are younger countries, or countries which are now going into public transport, countries like African countries, many of the, look at South Africa, look at the Tanzania, Kenya, and these are now just starting to put a public transport system. They had nothing, they had no legacy as such. And they are doing a much better job. I mean, India, for that matter. If you see, when in India, the bus contracts today, the ITS systems are built in there into those. And so they have done the legacy jump, but still the mindset jump has not happened in many of these places. So we have that gap. So in India, you can see all the buses, they have ITS system, they're generating a lot of data, telematics, but then it's not being deployed properly. Nobody is looking into that from a route planning perspective. The bureaucracy is slow. So humans become the bottleneck when it comes to those problems. So we need that transformation. We need that reform in the industry where we perceive public transport not as a what we call, a child who is not loved, an orphan, but we need to adopt it and bring it to the forefront. And you can also think it from that perspective, that public transport is literally for a city, from a smart city perspective. It is the eyes of the government or your city planners on the road. This is how they can monitor the city, because it goes everywhere. It serves everyone.
Correct. But there are a lot of interesting points you mentioned in their topic, like you mentioned about utilizing this unproductive time of public transportation commute for social media or something more personal level, right? So while a lot of automotive companies are talking about a car as a moving infrastructure, moving office, for that could be maybe personal office, but how about public transportation? The whole company is moving. So we'll see how this go. And we mentioned about the smart cities also. So coming to the topic of smart cities, and again, from the investment and ROI perspective, as you mentioned, that sometimes they look at it as a pure sunk cost. But if they start, hopefully they start changing this mindset. So bus network versus a metro / train network. So when the smart cities planners are deciding which route to take, I mean, is there any like 3-4 point compare for balancing it out? Okay, this much of bus versus this much of public transportation. How these two mode of commute actually are looked at from both impact perspective as well as from ROI perspective, and what are the key parameters of measuring that impact?
Yeah. This is a perennial transport debate. Bus versus rail, as we say, and you throw in light rail, it becomes even more complex. You throw in monorail, it becomes, another dimension to the whole thing.
Right.
So the answer for me on this one is not a fight between bus or rail. Okay, this is a horses for courses approach. If you're training for a 100-meter race, then you don't run marathons. Okay. It's as simple as that. Marathon body for a marathon runner is different. The training is different from a sprinter. And it's the same applies for cities. So it is not one or the other. Every city has a level of maturity. It goes through the transformation of maturity in their mobility space. And the public transport provision has to fit in and grow with that. And for a small city, bus is a perfect solution, where you need more flexibility. If the city has very high urban growth, you want to probably change the routes every year. And then you can't do with metros, unfortunately. Okay, reliance on buses is the perfectly right way to go. But when the cities are mature, like Hong Kong, Singapore, okay, these are confined cities, very limited boundaries. These cities, once they reach that level of maturity, and you have to move 70,000-80,000 people in certain corridors, buses just can't handle that work. Then you need metros.
Coming to the day-to-day challenges again, and we talked about the bus versus metro network. If you have to compare the developed cities versus developing cities, how the problems of operator differ from one to other. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, I think I said this earlier also, that the developed places, the money is less of a problem. So you have funding pipelines which are very clear, and public transport normally is well funded or well provided for. So money is not an issue, which means there are investments into renewal of assets, investments into new technologies, investments into creating reforms and creating services. In developing countries, those challenges are very starkly clear. Uh, Even if they want to do it, even if the mindset is there, they're reliant a lot on funding sources which are very tight. And often this is where the development agencies come and plug in the gap. But the process becomes more bureaucratic, more slower. So those are the, I would say, key differences between developed and developing countries. A bus costs you the same in both the places. A train
Right.
costs you the same in both the places. So it's just finding money for those things.
Well, there might be opportunities as many as we can imagine, but in your view, and this is for solutions providers, the companies out there in trying to innovate a lot of technologies. So, what the process gap or operational gap you think are still unanswered, unaddressed, which maybe the startups and scale up should be focusing on?
Hmm.
Any few pointers
Oh,
for them to
lot of
focus
this.
on,
This is a 1 hour lecture
which are
if you
still
ask
not
me. So,
addressed? Yeah.
okay. So in brief, I'll tell you. I mean, today a modern bus has about 300 sensors. Okay. So, and you have telematic system often built into those. There's a CAN bus on board. I mean, the whole design is based on a CAN system where you can tap into all the data, systems, subsystems, and everything else. So you have your data streams literally generated being second. You know your braking performance, you know the tilting performance, you know your fuel consumption, you know the speed, acceleration, deceleration, you know a whole temperatures, your humidity, all kind of measures are being captured, all kind of data is being captured using this multitude of sensors on the buses. A train probably has 2000 sensors, and then on the train, and then you have wayside sensors, the track side. You have a whole amount of sensors. You have computer vision, you have lidar cameras, you got your sounds, vibration, sound, acoustics. A lot of things are around there in this in ecosystem. There are two problems here. Okay, one, we are getting huge amount of data, okay, is being streamed in our systems, and the legacy decision making and the processes are not really designed around this kind of new data infrastructure. Okay, so the decision making is still very old style. Somebody prints them out in an Excel spreadsheet and does a PowerPoint presentation to the board, and then the board takes the decision. Okay, we are still far away from looking at dashboards and creating slicing and dicing the data and creating sophisticated statistical models and stuff. So that is not happening. So that is one part where we there's a huge room for this industry to grow. When I was into the operation of buses with 4,000 buses, were generating 200 million transactions a day, and this is just the buses on the road. Now, to be able to synthesize this data on a daily basis, often you ask a public transport problem, they think this is a problem for them. Too much information coming in because I just can't process so much information. Why do I even have to look at that data? But if you ask a new entrepreneur, a tech guy, he would love to have this kind of data because you can do wonders with this information. Okay, so that is the gap, and that is where there's a lot of opportunity. The second problem that is where the opportunity lie is that most of these systems and subsystems, they are all proprietary systems. They're provided by different vendors, different suppliers, and these machines don't talk to each other. So there is sometimes a lot of duplication of the same thing on board the buses. So let's say if you walk into a bus in Singapore and just see what the driver does before he starts his work. He'll switch on the fare collection system. He'll switch on the boarding stop announcement system. He'll switch on the telematics system. He'll switch on the communication system. They're all different. Now, if CK, you are from this field, if you have to redesign a bus, would you design it the same way?
No, I just want to press button, then move on.
I would actually have a sensor where the driver goes in as soon as he sits in the seat. The bus should know, and everything should just switch on by itself.
Reconfigured for even the pre-configured for driver A versus driver B.
Exactly. So if I walk to my Tesla, and as I get in, the Tesla knows it's me because it detects my phone, and it adjusts the seat for me. It adjusts the whole driving parameters for me. And my wife goes and it changes everything just by itself. We don't even have to have any key. We don't have to press any button. Everything is all done. Why can't we do the same thing for a bus?
Which makes sense. Why can't we do that for the bus? So maybe just deeper in this. So basically, if you have the answer why we can't do this, is it more like an infrastructural issue that they are not as smart from the infrastructure point of view, or it's just somebody have to codify it?
It's just a traditional way of designing where, I buy one box. So basically, I always just give an example on the bus industry. We are like Newton time. We make one hole for mouse, we make another hole for cat, we make another one for dog. But we just keep creating different holes for different routes for different people without ever thinking that one can be used for all three.
Back in 5 years back, around 2015, a lot of OEMs, market research companies are predicting that 2020 will have the AVs on the road, we'll have flying taxis, we'll have the Hyperloop. I'm all said and done, but we saw what we saw in 2020.
Yeah.
So in your personal view, and obviously talking to a lot of challenges on the ground with the leaders, how bullish you are about this AV and flying taxi? Yes, I believe that it will happen for sure, but realistically, where do we see it? While the innovation technologies are great, but how do these technologies are evolving and making an impact? And let's give them maybe another 20 years, right, to settle the technologies, efficiencies, regulation, and those kind of things. So if I ask you this question, not today, 2040, what would be your answer?
Let's start with AV first. So AV is a classic 80-20 problem. 80-20 rule. So 80% of the effort or success requires 20% of the effort, and it's the last 20% requires 80% of the effort. Okay, and as it becomes closer and closer, it becomes harder and harder. Okay, so we are already, as far as AVs are concerned, I think from a technology perspective, in last 15 years, we are probably about from an algorithmic perspective, we are probably 1,000,000 times faster and closer. But now we have come to a point where we are now, every extra percentage of improvement requires an inordinate amount of work, research work. So AVs in a controlled environment are perfectly okay. You can do it today. We have solved the technology already. You got LiDAR cameras, sonar sensors, radars, infrareds, all kind of sensing technologies are there. We are making 80-90% of detection absolutely, well, not 90, more than 90% of the detection accurately. The predictions are fantastic. And I can tell you that, as far as the numbers are concerned, this AV technology has already surpassed the human technology, which means the number of kilometers that an AV autonomous vehicle can do without causing an accident is actually already higher than with a human driver statistically.
Right.
Okay, but we obviously, as a mankind, we have a different perception. We want AVs to be 1,000 times better than humans, not just same as humans. We can forgive a human mistake. We won't forgive a AV making a mistake. Okay, right. So that is the dilemma, and that is where the problem lies at the moment. So we are not 100%, but we are 95-96% there already. So that's on AVs, and I think full AV is not, technology is not going to be the barrier in full AV adoption. It is going to be the legislative framework, the regulations, the conservatism of society. That is going to be a problem. We still will have a hard time accepting the fact that our bus has no driver, right? And I think that mindset, we still, as a people, as culturally, we are not programmed to adapt to that. So people who are writing laws, people who are writing regulations in the cities, you can imagine how hard their job is when it comes to AV. So that is where the barriers, I would say, will lie. EVs are today, I think if anybody is buying an ICE vehicle is making a mistake. Okay,
Mm.
you are buying into a dying technology. It's already dead, in my opinion. Okay, and if you see, GM has already announced that after 2035 they are not going to produce any ICE vehicles. Ford is moving towards that. Volkswagen is moving towards that. Many cities and countries, London has announced that after 2035 you cannot sell any petrol diesel vehicles in UK. Hong Kong has just announced that they will do very similar thing after 2035. There'll be no petrol diesel vehicle sales here. So that transformation is already there. The economics is working for EV. So EVs have already crossed that barrier, and I think it's a reality of the future. The third one is a flying taxi. Flying taxi for me is a great concept. Okay, it sounds very sci-fi, but my view is very simple. If I have 20 taxis flying above me, that's sexy. People will take pictures. The moment you have 200,000 flying taxis, like you have taxis in Singapore, can you imagine what we will be creating in the air?
Right.
Do you really want this to be flying around on top of your head? Okay.
Correct.
And this is where my conjecture lies, that it is not, technology is again not the problem. It is not scalable, because when you want to move 12 million, 13 million journeys in a city every day, you really cannot move them using a flying taxi, for that matter. Okay, because it's just, so it is going to be there. Maybe it will be a very niche market, niche industry, where people will be able to, the rich people, or a certain segment of people, maybe just the emergencies or the police, or those kind of first responders, they will use them. So technology will be there, but it will not be everybody's technology. It will not be for everybody's use.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's what I was to make the same comment that flying taxi, yes, will be there, I'm sure, as well, and within our lifetime, I'm sure also, but may not be for the masses, but maybe for some niche and specific usage. But to be more effective, like you said about the AV technologies also, AV technology is there, but to adopt it in a controlled environment, we can do it now itself. But to put it into the road, that's more of legislative issues versus technology readiness. So maybe we'll talk in 2040 and see where do we stand on the topic again.
Yeah, maybe
So,
I'll fly in a flying taxi to Singapore and meet you.
right, that'll be interesting. And
Yeah.
coming to, I mean, there's so many challenges which, if you look at the whole spectrum of the stakeholders, from operators to OEM, from government, all these different bodies. And as a company, we are also a big believer and driver of what we call a total ecosystem value. Basically, bring the partners together and solve the problems rather than trying to solve everything by ourselves.
Hmm.
Right. So, can you give some examples that how have you seen this ecosystem approach being more successful in or some other company which you advise? How are they applying this collaboration?
So, okay, so there is a new space that is being created at the moment. So we used to have private cars and we used to have public transport. And these were two kind of extremes of mobility solution in the cities. But there is a new layer that is coming in between, which is public transport or public vehicles trying to be like private, or deliver services and experience that a private vehicle does. And similarly, there is a move from private vehicle automotive services like Uber. They are moving towards making this more of a public usage vehicle. So there is a space in between that is being created, and this is where the new technology players, the OEMs, and all these people, they have kind of created that space, which was previously, due to the lack of technology, was very hard to deliver. And now, because of the technology, that space is completely opening up, where you are in that middle space. So today, I don't have to own a car. I can use Uber all my time and have a car-like experience. Okay. Similarly, You can, if you don't like going into those high capacity buses where you are squeezed with everyone, there are solutions where you can run a shared buses, where you have your dedicated seat, you have your personal
Right.
space. It picks you from your door, drops you at your office, but you are still sitting with 15, 16 people. And a lot of those examples are running around the world in many cities, and especially during COVID. This on shared mobility, what we call demand responsive transit, has become extremely popular in many places. A lot of new projects in various parts of the world have come up, and that solution is also in place. And that is the place where these OEMs and the new technology players are not just creating a whole new market for mobility, but also demonstrating what can be done with IoTs and data and technology driven approach in the whole industry.
On the topic of smart cities versus smart villages or maybe remote areas, if I call, I mean, we have been to connect those people with internet and the mobile. I mean, we can see the TikTok somebody making in a village. That's great, but we still haven't been able to connect them physically. Virtually, yes, but physically, I think still a long way to go. So, what do you see? What governments are doing, the OEMs are doing to be able to connect those disconnected, not through the virtual world, but really physical world, and bring them closer to each other in transportation manner.
So yeah, so transport is of course the connect for the and transport is one of, as I say, is an essential utility. Everybody needs that. Okay, there is nobody in the world who says that I don't need transport. The moment you step out of your house, you are, even if you're walking, you need some transport facilities. Walking is a form of transport. So smart village or smart city perspective, there are a lot of, again, those solutions which are technology driven solutions. So I'm aware of let's say in UK, in rural areas, there is an area of approximately 80 square kilometers where they provide a demand responsive transport service. So people, you can call using a landline to a call center and say, I need to be picked up from here and I need to go somewhere else. And within 15 to 20 minutes, a shared bus comes to your doorstep, picks you up, and takes you where you want to go. So it is solving the problem of physical connectivity, even then when there are no, or there is a lack of internet in those areas.
Mm.
Okay, so it is something that is doable, honestly, and it is being done. Technology is what is enabling this. So the dynamic dispatching, dynamic scheduling, and all this that we talked about, that is what is enabling this work in rural areas. So you are not perfect yet. It's not available when you need it, but 15, 20 minutes and or half an hour, I think this is still the parameters. From, if you compare from not having a service versus having a service with a half-hour notice, that is still already a huge improvement in those.
Sustainability is getting a lot of attention in last 5-6 years, whether you see, especially the large organizations who have even dedicatedly appointed the chief sustainability officers as well. And you're part of the Council of Decarbonization Transport in Asia. How do you see the public transportation operators are contributing to this topic? What governments are trying to do globally to drive this sustainability in public transportation?
Okay, yeah, well, this is the race to the zero. So countries like China, they have put in very ambitious target to be carbon neutral by 2060. Hong Kong is target for carbon neutral by 2050. So part of the carbon neutrality, so let's say in the city space, transport still remains one of the significant contributors to the pollution, the greenhouse gases, and etc. And you can eliminate the tailpipe emission, by just changing everything into electric. So that is a simple, easiest way to do this. But electric is still energy, end of the day. So, personally, my personal view is that not just transformation to EV, we also need to transform the whole energy performance of the ecosystem. We need to
Right.
just do more with less. If you are doing electricity systems and 40% of your electricity is lost into distribution from where it is generated to where it is consumed, then that's a sheer waste of resources. So those things need to be fixed. We need to create more efficient vehicles. We need to create more efficient transmission systems, etc., etc. So the whole pipeline has to become efficient. The third area is that, do we need to live and work the way we do today? Can that change? Can we adapt to a completely new lifestyle? Can we adapt to a completely new type of world? And especially when it comes to, I mean, I was watching this interesting discussion the other day where they said that by 2050, the robots and AI will be doing all the work, and we will be just consuming entertainment all the time. Okay, that will be the lifestyle at that time. I don't know how true that will be, but there will be changes to lifestyle, and if we can move them in the right direction, then we can create a better future for the society. But Paris, for example, has proposed this new idea about creating a 15-minute city, which means almost 70, 80, 90% of your daily work can be done within that boundary. So you never have to even get on a bus or a train or a car. You can bicycle or you can walk everywhere. Okay, so it's a novel concept. In my mind, I still have a lot of questions and I can't resolve it. But having said that, it's an interesting idea, nevertheless. So that is a third area where people need to explore how we can we just change the way we work, the way we go to school, the way we consume facilities, the way we live in the cities, and can that transformation change the transport space completely? Another area where I have a big interest in that, and I don't have all the answers, is that we talk about AV, okay? But your AV is also has exactly the same vehicle, same bus, right? We have not changed the fundamental concept of that vehicle, okay? We still have the same width of lanes. We still work with same constraints. It cannot be wider than this, cannot be longer than this, cannot be this, cannot be that. My question to that is, to many OEMs would be, why don't we completely redesign the bus? Why does the bus need 4 wheels? Okay, let me just ask you this question. I know I don't have an answer to this, but can we challenge that notion with new technologies? Can we just say, why not? Why if a cycle has 2 wheels, why can't a bus have 2 wheels?
Right, interesting.
Right? So you can completely redesign those kind of, and that's obviously, that's the R&D space where the answers may or may not be there, solution may or may not be there. I don't know. But idea is to explore. Unless you challenge those boundaries, you will never get the answer.
So that's where I think, like you said, we have to rethink and challenge the way we work, we live, we travel. And I think this will also contribute a lot of ideas and innovation in the transportation mobility space. I mean, the topic is very interesting, and I'm sure we can talk hours on this. But it's always pleasure to talk to you, Alok, and I always get some new insight from you on this topic.
Likewise, it's a pleasure talking to you.
And also, it's a pleasure to have you as a part of the advisory network of All Things Connected, Alok. And
my pleasure.
Look forward to do a lot more work together and hopefully to make a better and bigger impact in this topic of sustainability. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, CK. Have a great day.